Hello, everyone. My name is Kaylee George. I am a manager of arts education programs here at the Pittsburgh Cultural Trust. I use she, her pronouns. I am wearing a Six branded black t-shirt with black and yellow plaid pants and tall black boots. I am happy to welcome you to the Trust Arts Education Center. Thank you for joining us for Creative Conversations, where you get the inside scoop on the PNC Broadway and Pittsburgh series. I am pleased to introduce our presenter for today's Creative Conversations, Miss Cassidy Adkins.
Hello, hello. Hi, folks. How we doing? Good to see ya. I heard some friends singing along. I'm already loving our energy. My name is Cassidy Adkins. I am a local performer, teaching artist, choreographer, producer, general theater maven, which is typically the way it works. If any of you are theater people, very rarely do you do one thing. Most of the time you're doing a bunch of them. But one of the things that one of the reasons I'm so excited to be here and talking about Six is that I am a musical theater girly in my heart and soul. That is my background. That is what I have grown up doing. I did my first musical when I was 6 years old, and I couldn't memorize my own lines yet, so my grandmother had to read them to me, and I'd repeat them back to her because I couldn't read. And getting to talk about musical theater is always a thrill, but especially this show. Six is... the way that Six has worked its way into my heart and soul, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this, I think part of that comes from being a woman in theater and a woman in musical theater, and just the energy from it. It's such an incredible show. Show of hands, who here has already seen it? Has anybody already seen the show? Okay. Who here hasn't seen the show, but you know a lot about the show? And who is here being like, what the heck are we all doing here today? Sweet, I love that. We got a whole range. So we're going to talk about a couple different things today. We're going to talk about the history that actually inspired the show. I am not a historian. I'm a musical theater girl. So I will do my best. Most of what I know is from this show and my own research. I actually, during the pandemic, as I mentioned, I'm a teaching artist. And I was teaching a lot of online classes for everybody that was, trapped at home all the time. And I ran a 6-week course on Six. And as a result of that, I have come to know way more about Tudor history than I ever learned in high school, and a bunch about the production history. So we're going to talk about the literal history. We're going to talk about the production history. We're going to talk about some of the incredible wordsmithing that is in this show. One of my favorite things about Six is that it is a bunch of pop music, but it is just laced with incredible historical references that are such fun little Easter eggs I want to give you. For those of you that haven't seen it and are going in to see it, maybe you can go in and be like, oh yeah, we talked about that. We're going to talk about the costumes, because if you can't tell, the costumes are amazing. Those of you that have seen the show, the costumes under the lights blew my mind. It is the reason that I wore my most sparkly, which will actually remind me, the visual description for any of those looking into it. I am a short, pink-haired woman wearing a red velvet jumpsuit and my favorite jacket, which is a crop top with fringe all over the sleeves that is 100% covered in sequins. This is my attempt to give you some Tudor fashion Six the musical realness here. We got like a little corset action, but then a lot of rock and roll happening. I would also like to say we will have Q&A time at the end, but please feel free if you have a question or you have something to interject. Maybe you are more of an expert on Tudor history than I am. At any point, please feel free. Raise your hand. It's a conversation. Creative conversations. I can ramble, trust me. You can probably already tell. But please feel free if you have anything that you would like to contribute to our conversation. I would love to hear it. So, Six the musical. Six is relatively new in the world of musical theater, especially when you're looking at like the season that we got for the Cultural Trust. We have a lot of new things that came through town. Frozen's been around for a while, but the musical is a little newer. Beetlejuice is a little newer. Six was first produced in 2017. It is really, really fresh. It was written by two creators named Toby Marlowe and Lucy Moss. They met at Cambridge University in England. One of the reasons they went to Cambridge is Cambridge has the oldest student-run theater in all of England, because Cambridge, like Oxford, has been around forever. So they've had student-run theater going on for a long time there. But as is the case for a lot of student-run theater, they don't have much of a budget. So they're not paying to get the rights to do shows. They have their students write their own shows and perform them. So in 2016, Toby Marlowe was an English major at Cambridge. Lucy Moss was a history major. And the student-run theater program approached Toby about commissioning a piece that was going to go to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. If you're not familiar with the Fringe Festival, it is an incredible theater festival that takes over an entire town in Scotland. There are hundreds of shows going on any given weekend during the festival, and it is everything from like classic plays to brand new work to devised pieces to one person shows. It is a wide variety buffet of the theater experience. And so they knew that they were commissioned for a show, but they didn't have a show. So they had to figure out what they wanted to write about. Toby Marlowe didn't know precisely what he wanted to write about, but he did know a couple of things. Number one, he wanted the focus to be on women or non-binary characters. Check. 2, it would be about a famous subject. 3, it would be experimental, so something a little bit different from your standard theater going experience, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And 4, it would be pop music, because as Toby Marlowe says, it's the best kind of music, and we can all have different opinions about that. That's okay. But there's a reason pop music has been around for as long as it has. And so they got together and they started working, and they were thinking about a couple different historical stories they could tell. They thought about doing the backstory of the 3 witches from the Scottish play. I'm not going to say the word in case anybody in here is superstitious. If you don't know what I'm talking about, whisper to your neighbor. They thought about doing the Real Housewives of Shakespeare. There were a lot of different ideas that got kind of bandied about. But eventually, they settled on the 6 wives of Henry VIII. Who here already knows who the 6 wives of Henry VIII are? Okay, so some of us don't. That's awesome. Henry VIII, we don't like him. He was real bad. There's a reason that there's no other King Henry after him. Nobody wanted to take that name. But we're going to have a Henry defender? You are in the wrong room, sir. You are going to the wrong show. Well, hey, Henry is not who I think you want to fly that banner by. But he is most known for having these 6 wives. There's a lot of other things that come with it. One of the things is that the Church of England, his entire experience with religion in the country at that point was brought about by the fact that he wanted to remarry, which was not acceptable. A lot of his legacy comes from these women, but unfortunately, these women have frequently been relegated to a really well-known phrase: divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. One word to encompass a woman's entire life and legacy, from birth to death, some of whom's death was at the hand of this man. So when they brought in this idea, they talked about that 6 didn't come out of a love of the Tudor period particularly. That's what we call that era of history. It came from an interest in the representation of women in musical theater, having women on stage doing funny and hilarious things. What we were interested in doing was reframing the way that women have been perceived in history and telling their side of the story. So the goal of this show is not to be 100% historically accurate. A lot of it is. But it was mostly about, what if Anne Boleyn is like this? What if she reminds you of your sister or your best friend or a person you didn't get along with? Because guess what? People can have flaws. So it's about humanizing them and giving them a way to tell their own story in a way that was never really given to them. So if you are not familiar with the structure of 6, it is a quick 80-minute show. It's really fun. It is a freight train that does not stop. It is, the construct is that these 6 women are getting together and they're having a contest for who gets to be the lead singer of their all-girl band. The only way they can measure who gets to be the lead singer is by the one thing they have in common: Henry. Who got the biggest load of crap from Henry? Who experienced the most trauma from Henry? And so each of them get to sing a song where they plead their case. We start with Catherine of Aragon, who was the first wife of Henry VIII. His longest wife. They were married for 24 years, and seemingly pretty happy for the first 20 or so. But as many of us might know, if you have studied the traditional monarchy, the essence of it is you need to produce a male heir. that might have been a Freudian slip. A male heir to carry on the succession line. And when Catherine was unable to do that, in spite of the fact that she is, the quote from the song is, a paragon of royalty. She was considered to be the perfect queen. She was religious. She came from good breeding over in Spain. She was eloquent. She had actually been brought over to marry Henry's older brother, but he died because Tudor time periods, you get a cut on the hand and you could end up dead. So when his brother died, she ended up getting put in jail, because that makes sense. That's how we help widows grieve. And eventually, she gets to marry Henry. They spend 20 years together. She is not able to produce a male heir. And Henry's eye starts to wander. That's when we get to Anne Boleyn. Anne Boleyn, arguably the most famous of the six. If you only have a cursory knowledge of it, it's probably the one you've heard the most of. She got a whole movie about her. And Anne Boleyn is presented as very much this kind of, throughout history, she's like the seducer. She's like, oh, I'm so flirty, Henry. Come and marry me. Ditch your other wife. Never mind that we're taking in the fact that women's worth at that time was based on who they were married to. It was based on what children they were able to produce. So when we go from Catherine of Aragon to Anne Boleyn is the first one to be beheaded. She is beheaded because in Henry's eyes, he gets to go around and have a bunch of girlfriends, but she's sure not allowed to go around and flirt with anybody. So we have our first real tragedy happen where a young woman is killed at the hands of this man. The third is Jane Seymour, the only one he truly loved, is the quote. And there is some historical context to reinforce that idea. She was the only one that he continuously spoke kindly of until he himself died. She unfortunately died during childbirth. Anne of Cleves was then brought over next in a very old school Tinder-esque dating app way, where Henry got to see a bunch of portraits painted of all of his potential brides, painted by a German man named Hans Holbein. And he was like, ooh, that one, she's pretty, bring her over. When he brought her over, he suddenly was like, you don't look like your picture. I don't want to marry you anymore. Fun time to come all the way to a country where you don't speak the language, and also marrying a man who's 25 years older than you and already killed one of his wives. Dodgy at best. Anne of Cleves is the one that manages to get divorced. She lives the rest of her life in a resplendent palace in Richmond. She kind of gets the one maybe sort of happy ending guaranteed of these women. After that, we have Kay Howard, who was his youngest bride. She was beheaded by Henry when she was 17 and 30 years his junior. And then we ended up with Catherine Parr, the survivor. Catherine Parr is really interesting because she was an educator at the time. She made her mission. She had already been married twice before. She was a person who made her mission to educate other women. She was a painter and a writer in an age where not all women wrote. And she was the one that outlived Henry. Unfortunately, she doesn't get her happy ending because she remarries and ends up dying about 3 months after Henry. So, albeit say, yeah, downer, I know, I'm gonna bring it back up, I promise. So, we're getting these women that in that very cursory historical look over them, it sounds pretty bleak, right? It's not a great time for anybody. In the musical 6, we are getting the opportunity to celebrate their stories. They get these numbers where they get to come up and tell their story. And a lot of them are very comedically based. They're high energy. They're all based off of famous pop divas. So Catherine of Aragon, our boss queen, our Spanish leader, the paragon of royalty, is very much based on Beyonce and Jennifer Lopez. When you get to Anne Boleyn, who's a little cheeky, a little mischievous, she's very much based on Kate Nash and Lily Allen. There it is. And she gives you a little bit more of a punk pop kind of vibe going with her. She also has Miley Cyrus's patented space buns to kind of show you that she's a little chaotic goblin, and we love that about her. Jane Seymour is a very Adele, Sia-based power ballad performer. Anne of Cleves is based on Rihanna and Nicki Minaj. Where am I? Kay Howard is Ariana Grande and Britney Spears, talking about young women who are overly sexualized by the people around them and how that affects their lives. And Catherine Parr is based on an Alicia Keys type. So you're getting all of these different genres of pop music. And within these, you're getting all of these historical nuggets. At one point, Toby Marlowe didn't want to put any actual historical references in the songs. He wanted to be able to go and sell some pop songs if the show didn't do well. And then they realized that wasn't really going to work. So you get some real treats in here where like you get a line from Anne of Cleves that is, okay, ladies, let's get in Reformation. If you are a Beyonce fan, one of her biggest songs, let's get in formation. And if you are a history fan, you probably know about the Reformation of the Church of England. There's a lot of really wonderful nuggets in there. One of the things that every single song has a powerful moment and is so strong and so well performed. I got to see the show last night. I have loved this show since I first heard about it in 2018. And as a performer, I have given so many one-woman productions of Six in my car, in my kitchen, in the shower, anywhere I can. Getting to see it live was a really special moment for me. I actually kind of underestimated how emotional I was going to feel about it. I'm a crier. I'm an actor. We cry a lot. I knew I was going to cry. I didn't realize I was going to cry when the lights went down at the beginning of the show. And I was already like, I'm here. This is happening. And I kind of had a moment where I felt a little silly because I'm crying at these like exuberant dance numbers. I'm crying at these funny girl power moments. And my friend that went with me, I kind of leaned over to her and I was like, I feel silly. I kind of confessed to her. And she's like, Cassidy, we grew up together. We are theater kids that have been doing this together since we were tiny. She's like, how many hundreds of shows have we seen? And how many of those shows has it been entirely women on that stage? The entire cast is female. The entire band is female. That's never happened to me. And I've seen a lot of theater. And to not only see an entirely female cast, but to see a female cast that everybody looks so different from each other. Everybody is being celebrated for different strengths and for their flaws. These women are not presented to be, perfect and put upon entirely. Everybody's got their crap, we're realistic about that. But to be able to see them all up on this stage, and there have been so many productions of Six since 2018. I'm pretty sure at this moment there are 9 companies around the world performing Six. There are 2 American tours. There's the Broadway company. There's the West End company in London. There's a touring company in England. There is a company in Holland, and I think there's 3 cruise ship companies doing it right now. So there's 100 women at any given time performing these same 6 roles. And every single one of them gets to bring something new to it. I have watched a lot of clips from different casts, and while I named a lot of those pop stars that are the models that they were written off of, a lot of these women talk about the fact that they get the freedom to bring in their own inspirations. So Abby Mueller, who played Jane Seymour on Broadway, talked about that her Jane Seymour was a little less Adele, a little bit more Dolly Parton, because she has the American influence. And so she brought that kind of sweet, slight country yodel into the way that she sang the song. Brittany Mack, who played Anne of Cleves on Broadway, who had been based on Rihanna and Nicki Minaj, took a lot of Lizzo and brought a lot of that Lizzo energy of look at me, I'm the coolest, really get into my game. They get to bring their own things into it. When you see the show tonight, they're not gonna speak with British accents. They're gonna use their own American voices. And when you see the show in Holland, they're gonna be speaking in their Dutch dialect. Yeah, that's the right one. When you see it in Australia, same thing, because they wanted it to not be about fitting a cookie cutter of what we have seen of these women, but bringing your own personal self into it. So as you watch this show, I really want to encourage you to kind of bask in that glory and in the fact that a lot of these actresses have talked about the fact that you don't get opportunities like this. This is kind of a dream job. I know it's a dream job for me. Hey, Six. Hire me. I'm saying just to the gods of the theater at this point. They get to bring a lot of themselves into it, which is such a treat. And while bringing in all of these historical aspects, it's really kind of the perfect confluence of a lot of different things. A couple other things I want to mention. Check where I am on time. Oh yeah, we got some time. Toby and Lucy wrote the show, or at least outlined the show, in 10 days from start to finish. They were like, okay, here's what we're doing, we're running with it. Like any good show, any good play, any good book, there are drafts. They're gonna rewrite some things. But they've said a lot of stuff has stayed pretty intact from that first Fringe production. They've done some nuance to the ending of the show, which I'm not gonna give away to you. It's only 90 minutes, you don't have to wait that long. And they also took a lot of influence from learning about historical references as well. When we talked about Catherine of Aragon, her whole song is meant to represent when she was speaking to the talking too fast. The Blackfriars, which is when Henry was trying to divorce her, is claiming, he used this line after being married for 20 years, that he cited the Bible for his grounds for divorce. There were 2 lines from Leviticus. Thou shalt not uncover the nakedness of thy brother's wife. It is thy brother's nakedness. If a man shall take his brother's wife, it is an unclean thing, and they shall be childless. They had a daughter. Daughters are so easy to forget. That's a line in the show, and for a good reason. So it's taking a moment of, instead of her sadness and her heartbreak for being treated this way and being sent away and separated from her child for the rest of her life, they took a very defiant moment where she got to stand up to this man who is treated her terribly and who's trying to basically erase her and tell him exactly why she will not be sent away. There's no way. She's going to be queen till the end of her life. Catherine of Aragon maintained until the day she died, she was the true queen of England. When we get to a lot of these other queens, we start to learn, Catherine Howard is another example. She's been written in history as being the temptress. She was the young girl that came to court and started flirting with everyone. She was a young girl. She was 16, 15 probably. We actually don't know the exact year she was born. When she was brought to court to marry a man who's 40 years old at this point and surrounded by people that are preying on her. And history chose to write her as the problem. That was one of the other things that Lucy Moss was a history major. And she said a lot of history I was doing for my degree was feminist history and revisionist history. So it chimed with how I was already approaching the historical subject matter. That was when I was like, oh, this could be a cool feminist thing. There is a different take on the wives, and there is a historical wrong to be redressed. This is not necessarily all based in true, accurate, 100% historical context, because as we all know, history is written by the victors. There are things we're never going to get to know about these women. But having this opportunity to put ourselves in their shoes, their very fabulous, bedazzled shoes in this show, to create that empathy, to allow yourself, no matter what your gender identity, no matter where you come from in life, what age you are, what your marriage experiences have been, your personal experiences have been, to be able to imagine what that must be like and to hear it from their point of view, getting to be able to finally tell their side of it. There's something really powerful about that. And it's super fun on top of it. It's like it's giving you that, nice dose of sugar with your medicine. You're getting all the history, but you're also getting a lot of empowerment and a lot of joy. One of the other things I did want to talk about, because I think it is worth mentioning, these costumes that you're seeing up here, they're pretty incredible. Gabriella Slade is the costume designer of Six, and she talks about the fact that she took traditional Tudor garments and silhouettes, like you see the square neckline. She actually looked at a lot of portraits of these queens and saw what they were most commonly wearing. Catherine of Aragon was often wearing gold with this square neckline. We've got the puffy sleeves. She brought in some elements of male Tudor fashion, things traditionally worn by the men of the time, so that the women were able to have that empowerment, like these kind of sleeves and obviously the pants. And created these very traditional silhouettes, but then to merge them with the modern pop context of the show, she used all new materials, all very modern materials. So we've got vinyl, we've got PVC pipe in some of these outfits. We've got these glorious metallic elements. They are all pulled together by these studs that you'll see are running all over their costumes. And they were very much meant to represent the era of these women's lives, but also to bring them into this modern pop context, to give them all each an individual identity. They all get their own colors, they all get their own style, but they're still cohesive. They're brought together largely by that black studding, and as well as the general feel of it. Some of these costumes are insanely heavy. Catherine of Aragon's costume apparently weighs something like 30 pounds. And when you watch her dance, you're gonna go, how? I actually, weirdly enough, I have had frequent dreams about being in this show, literal dreams. And I had a dream that I was playing Catherine of Aragon and my skirt was so heavy that it kept falling down on stage. But that feels pretty realistic. They are very heavy. If you see a lot of the understudies, if you follow any of them, there's a big social media presence for Six on Instagram and a lot of the other ones. The Swings will talk about that when they rehearse the show, they practice in weighted vests because they have to make sure that their stamina is ready to put on these heavy, heavy costumes that they might not get to wear for months at a time. They are athletes up there. They're doing this in heels. They're doing it with a lot of costume on, and they are singing their faces off the entire time that they are dancing up there as well. So I crammed a lot of information in 25 minutes there. We kind of went all over the board. Oh, thank you. Appreciate that. I think the biggest thing I want you to take away from this, whether you're seeing the show tonight or you're seeing it later in the week, the tagline on the poster talks about the euphoric Broadway sensation, and I can't really think of a better word. It is euphoric, I think, for anybody to experience, but especially for any female-identifying person who just gets to see themselves in a way that we don't often get to see. We're not the ingenue. We're not the subject of a man's gaze or a man's desires. We can be that in addition to being a million other things. And I love the fact that Six has such a wide fan base. Like, there are little kids, smaller than any of you here, that know every single word to this show. And the fact that they are getting to internalize that at that age, I can't imagine what that must feel like, considering what it did for me as a 28-year-old woman when I discovered it. And I hope you all get to walk in, and like I said, no matter what your gender identity, no matter what your background is, I think there is something we need more female empowerment. I think we can all agree on that. That is a thing we will need for hopefully not forever, but we're certainly needing it now. And enjoying that moment of seeing that representation up there, that representation of an incredibly diverse cast, of an incredibly diverse in race, in gender. There are non-binary cast members that are a part of this show, of background, of body type. That's another part of it, is, getting to see all these different representations. It really means something, and I hope it affects each and every one of you, at least in some small way, and if not in a massive way that makes you cry during the opening number, like someone I know. We have a couple minutes left. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Anything, if you've seen the show, anything you would like to interject? If you know something about history that I bogged up in this conversation, call me out. I'm fine with it. It's a quiet group. Don't be quiet when you go see the show. Yeah. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Kaylee's going to bring you a microphone.
Hi, I just wanted to say you did very good historically. Catherine Parr married Thomas Seymour.
Jane Seymour's brother, yeah.
Yes. And she died in childbirth.
Yeah.
So it was more than 3 months after Henry.
Oh, it was?
You said
I think they must have met. Maybe it was they got remarried or something. I have three in my head.
They were dating before.
Yeah.
They were supposed to get married, and then Henry decided he wanted Catherine.
Yeah.
So they broke up, and then they got back together after Henry's funeral.
Yeah.
And then she got pregnant, and
Didn't survive.
didn't
Live up to her name. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. There's also a lot of fun little Easter eggs when you find out between these women that they were connected. Catherine Howard and Anne Boleyn were actually cousins. They were related. Catherine Parr, as this gentleman just informed us, was married to Thomas Seymour, who was Jane Seymour's brother. Catherine of Aragon, I think, was Catherine Parr's godmother. There's another duo that I'm forgetting where there's a connection where it was literally a godmother and a goddaughter, which also, that's got to be a trip when your ex-husband decides he's going to marry your goddaughter. Okay, dude. All right. Any other questions, comments? Thank you all so much for hanging out with me and letting me ramble about one of my favorite things. I hope I built it up just the right amount and you get to take all of your own stuff out of it. I hope you have a really, really excellent time. Thank you to Kaylee and the Cultural Trust for having these events. I think it's so great to be able to have these conversations and go in with a little context. And hooray for theater. Keep coming to the theater. Give us jobs. This is going on the internet and I'm doing things like this. That's great. All right, folks, have a great time. Thank you so much. My name's Cassidy Adkins. Feel free to come up and chat with me if you'd like. Thanks so much for your time. Enjoy the show.